The blood-spattered telegram trembled in Zara Campbell's shaking hands as she stood frozen on the dusty main street of Redding, California, her bruised face hidden beneath the wide brim of a borrowed bonnet. The year was 1875, and she had nowhere left to run. Redding was supposed to be her salvation, a place far from the nightmare she'd fled. The small but growing town nestled in the Sacramento Valley had sprung up with the railroad's arrival a few years prior, its streets now bustling with miners, merchants, and travelers heading north to Oregon or south to Sacramento. To Zara, it represented her last hope. She carefully folded the telegram and tucked it into her sleeve. The message had followed her across 3 states. He had found her again. "Miss, are you quite all right?" The station master's voice startled her. "You've been standing there near 20 minutes." "Yes, thank you," Zara whispered, the words like sandpaper in her throat. Speaking hurt, the remnants of fingers wrapped too tightly around her neck still evident in the yellowing bruises she concealed with a high-collared dress despite the summer heat. She turned away quickly, not wanting the man to see her face too clearly. Memories might keep her alive, if anyone recognized her and word got back to Pittsburgh. Zara gathered her single carpetbag and moved purposefully down Redding's main thoroughfare. The town was larger than she'd expected, with clapboard buildings, a proper hotel, and several saloons. Horses kicked up dust as wagons rumbled past. A group of miners, fresh from the diggings north of town, laughed raucously outside a gambling hall. She needed work and a place to stay somewhere unobtrusive where questions weren't asked. The weight of her dwindling funds pressed heavier than her bag. $3.42 wouldn't last long, even in a frontier town. The cattleman's saloon looked less rowdy than the others, its freshly painted exterior suggesting a certain respectability. A help wanted sign hung in the window. Zara hesitated only briefly before climbing the wooden steps to the entrance, adjusting her bonnet to ensure her face remained shadowed. Inside, the saloon was surprisingly clean, with polished tables and a long mahogany bar. A few afternoon patrons nursed drinks in the corner, while a piano sat silent against one wall. The barkeep, a stout woman with gray-streaked hair pinned severely atop her head, looked up as Zara approached. "We ain't open to unescorted ladies until after 6, she said firmly. "I came about the position," Zara replied softly, gesturing toward the sign. The woman's eyes narrowed, assessing. "Serving girls need to show their faces to customers. Take off that bonnet, girl." Zara's heart quickened. Slowly she removed the bonnet, keeping her eyes downcast. She heard the woman's sharp intake of breath. "Good Lord, child. Who did that to you?" Zara remained silent, her hands clutching the bonnet. "Can you serve drinks, clear tables?" the barkeep pressed. "Yes, madam." "Can you speak above a whisper?" Zara tried, managing a slightly louder "yes, madam" that sent pain shooting through her throat. The woman sighed. "I'm Ida Marshall. I own this establishment, room and board with the job, plus 10% of the bar's daily take. No funny business with the customers, though some will try. We serve drinks and food, not women." "Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Don't thank me yet. Start tonight. Kitchens through there, Martha will show you where to sleep." Zara nodded, relief washing through her. She had shelter, at least for now. "And girl," Ida called as Zara turned to go. "Whatever you're running from, whoever put those marks on you, Redding's a small town. Secrets don't stay buried long." The warning hung in the air as Zara made her way to the kitchen. Martha, a round-faced cook with flour-covered hands, showed her to a small room above the saloon. The space was sparse but clean: a narrow bed, a washstand, a cracked mirror, and a hook for her few belongings. Alone, Zara finally allowed herself to truly look at her reflection. Yellow-green bruises mottled her cheekbones. Her left eye remained swollen, though the worst of the blackness had faded during her journey west. The marks around her throat were vivid purple against her pale skin. She touched them gingerly, remembering the moment she'd believed she would die in that elegant Pittsburgh mansion. She unpacked her meager possessions: 2 dresses, a nightgown, a hairbrush, and the tiny Derringer pistol she'd stolen from his desk drawer as she fled. The gun represented both her shame and her determination. Never again would she be helpless. As the afternoon light faded, Zara changed into the least worn of her dresses and prepared to face her first evening at the cattleman's saloon. The bustle of customers grew louder downstairs: miners, cowboys, and townsmen gathering for evening drinks and conversation. Her hands trembled as she descended the back stairs into the kitchen. Martha handed her an apron. "Most are decent enough folk," the cook offered kindly. "Keep your head down and you'll do fine." The evening passed in a blur of beer mugs, whiskey glasses, and shouted orders. Zara moved silently between tables, keeping her eyes lowered, her bruised face turned away from curious stares. When men tried to engage her in conversation, she nodded politely but didn't speak. Some looked offended, others concerned, but most simply turned back to their drinks. Near midnight, the saloon doors swung open and the room fell momentarily quiet. Zara glanced up to see a tall man silhouetted against the doorway. He stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal sun-bronzed features and dark hair that fell carelessly across his forehead. Unlike the miners with their rough clothing or the townsmen in their worn suits, this man carried himself with quiet confidence. His clothes, dark trousers, a blue shirt, and a black vest, were dusty from the trail but of good quality. "Xavier." "Back from the high country, I see," Ida called from behind the bar. "Your usual," obliged Ida. His voice was deep, unhurried. As he made his way to the bar, his gaze swept the room, a habit, Zara guessed, of a man accustomed to assessing his surroundings. When his eyes fell on her, she quickly looked away, but not before noticing they were a startling blue against his tanned skin. Ida placed a glass of amber liquid before him. "Xavier Harrington, meet our newest girl. She started today." Zara felt his gaze again but couldn't bring herself to look up. "Madam," he said simply, tipping his head in greeting. She nodded silently in return, gathering empty glasses from a nearby table. "Not much for conversation, that one," Ida explained quietly, though Zara could still hear. "But she works hard enough." Xavier Harrington made no comment, but as Zara moved around the room, she felt his eyes following her. Not with the leering interest of some patrons, but with something that felt uncomfortably like recognition, as though he could read the story written in her bruises. As the night wore on, the saloon gradually emptied. Xavier remained at the bar, nursing his second whiskey, occasionally exchanging words with Ida or nodding to departing patrons. Many addressed him by name, suggesting he was well known in Reading. Zara was wiping down tables when the saloon doors burst open again. 5 men entered, trail dust coating their clothes, spurs jingling with each step. Their leader, a thick-set man with a handlebar mustache and small, mean eyes, surveyed the nearly empty room. "Little late for new customers, Fletcher," Ida called. "We're about to close up." "Just passing through looking for a bit of refreshment," Fletcher replied, his words slightly slurred. His gaze landed on Zara and a slow smile spread beneath his mustache. "And maybe some company." Zara kept her head down, continuing to wipe tables, but her heart raced. She'd seen that look before in Pittsburgh drawing rooms and on the faces of men who believed money entitled them to whatever they desired. "The girl's not available for company," Ida said firmly. "But I can pour you one drink before we close." Fletcher ignored her, moving directly toward Zara. "What happened to your pretty face, darlin'?" he asked, reaching out to grab her chin. She flinched away, dropping her rag. "The lady doesn't want to be touched." Xavier Harrington's voice cut through the tension. He hadn't moved from his place at the bar, but his posture had shifted, alert, ready. Fletcher turned slowly. "This ain't your business, Harrington. I'm making it my business." Xavier's tone remained calm, but something in it made Fletcher hesitate. "The lady works here. She's not for sale." The other men with Fletcher had spread out slightly, hands hovering near holstered pistols. Zara stood frozen, trapped between them. "Seems I struck a nerve," Fletcher sneered. "Got yourself a banged-up little whore, have you?" The movement happened so quickly Zara barely registered it. One moment Xavier was at the bar, the next he'd crossed the room and had Fletcher pinned against a post, forearm pressed against the man's throat. "Apologize to the lady," Xavier said quietly. Fletcher's face reddened. "Go to hell." Xavier increased the pressure on the man's throat. "You've been riding hard, you're drunk, and you're not thinking clearly. I'm giving you a chance to leave this room with your dignity intact." For a tense moment, no one moved. Zara held her breath, watching Fletcher's companions shift uneasily. Finally, Fletcher gave a jerky nod and Xavier released him. "Sorry," Fletcher muttered insincerely, straightening his rumpled shirt. "Ida, I believe these gentlemen were just leaving," Xavier said without taking his eyes off Fletcher. "You heard him, boys," Ida agreed. "Come back tomorrow when you're sober." Fletcher glared at Xavier, then at Zara. "This ain't over, Harrington." He motioned to his men and they backed out of the saloon, the doors swinging shut behind them. The room fell silent. Zara realized she was trembling. "Thank you," she managed, the words barely audible. Xavier turned to her, his expression softening. "Fletcher's bark is worse than his bite. But stay clear of him all the same." She nodded, bending to retrieve her dropped cloth. "Xavier runs the Broken Arrow Ranch north of town," Ida explained, moving to lock the doors. "One of the few honest cattlemen in these parts. Just trying to make a living like everyone else," he demurred, returning to the bar to finish his drink. But his eyes lingered on Zara with quiet concern. "You should get some rest," Ida told her. "Morning comes early around here." Grateful for the dismissal, Zara retreated upstairs to her small room. Through the thin floorboards, she could hear muffled voices, Ida and Xavier speaking in low tones. Though she couldn't make out the words, the rhythm of their conversation suggested serious discussion. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the narrow bed, running her fingers over the bruises at her throat. For the first time since fleeing Pittsburgh, she allowed herself to cry silent tears, sliding down her bruised cheeks. The weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future pressed down upon her. A soft knock at her door startled her. She quickly wiped her face and pulled her shawl around her shoulders before cracking the door open. Ida stood outside, holding a small jar. "Arnica salve," she explained. "For those bruises. Works wonders." Zara accepted the jar with murmured thanks. "Xavier's gone now, but he wanted me to tell you not to worry about Fletcher. He won't be back tonight." Ida paused, studying Zara's face. "You know, girl, whatever you're running from, whoever did that to you, you're in Reading now. Things can be different here." "Thank you," Zara whispered, not trusting herself to say more. Ida nodded and turned to go, then stopped. "Xavier asked your name. I realized I never did." "Zara," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Zara Campbell." "Well, Miss Campbell, get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day." Alone again, Zara applied the salve to her bruises. The ointment's herbal scent filled the small room as she gently dabbed it around her eye, across her cheekbones, and along her throat. The cool sensation brought relief to her tender skin. She extinguished the lamp and lay in darkness. listening to the night sounds of redding distant piano music from another saloon, the occasional shout or laugh, the steady chirp of crickets. Far different from the elegant silence of the Pittsburgh mansion, where she'd spent the last 2 years of her life. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of pursuing footsteps and the phantom sensation of hands around her throat. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through her small window. Zara dressed carefully, noting with satisfaction that the salve had indeed reduced some of the swelling around her eye. She pinned her dark hair simply at the nape of her neck and descended to the kitchen. Martha was already at work, kneading dough for the day's bread. "Morning, miss. Coffee's hot if you want some." Zara accepted a cup gratefully, warming her hands around the thick mug. The cattleman served breakfast to overnight guests and early risers, and soon she was busy carrying plates of eggs and bacon to bleary-eyed miners and travelers. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor. Xavier Harrington entered the saloon, hat in hand, looking considerably fresher than he had the previous evening. He nodded politely to Ida and took a seat at a corner table. Zara approached hesitantly to take his order. "Just coffee, thank you," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. She nodded and turned to fetch it, aware of his gaze following her. When she returned with his coffee, he gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Would you sit a moment, Miss Campbell?" Surprised at his use of her name, Zara glanced toward Ida, who gave a slight nod of permission. She lowered herself cautiously into the chair, hands folded in her lap. "I wanted to make sure you were all right after last night's unpleasantness," Xavier said. "I am. Thank you for your intervention," she replied softly. He studied her for a moment, noting how she kept her face partially turned away. "Those bruises," he said finally. "They're why you came to Reading." Zara's head jerked up, fear flashing in her eyes. "I'm not asking who or why," he clarified quickly. "That's your business." But I recognized the look of someone running from something. She remained silent, not confirming or denying his assessment. Xavier leaned forward slightly. "Miss Campbell, I don't know what brought you to Reading, but I want you to know that not everyone here is like Fletcher. Most folks mind their own affairs and judge people by their actions, not their past." "That's reassuring," Zara managed. "If you need assistance of any kind, I'd be happy to help." He paused, then added, "No strings attached, just one person helping another." His directness was disarming. After months of deception and fear, Xavier Harrington's straightforward offer of help without demand seemed almost too good to be true. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, genuinely curious. A shadow crossed his face. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when people look the other way." He finished his coffee and stood. "I'll be in town for supplies today. My ranch is about 10 miles north the Broken Arrow. If you ever need anything, send word." With that, he placed a coin on the table, nodded respectfully, and departed, leaving Zara bewildered by the unexpected kindness. The day passed in a steady rhythm of customers. By evening, word of Fletcher's confrontation with Xavier had spread, and curious townspeople came to see the new serving girl with the bruised face. Zara endured their stares stoically, focusing on her work. As darkness fell, the saloon filled again. This time, Fletcher and his men did not return, for which Zara was grateful. But just before midnight, a new threat arrived. The telegram messenger stepped into the saloon, scanning the room. "I'm looking for a Miss Zara Campbell," he announced. Zara froze by the bar, a tray of empty glasses in her hands. How had he found her so quickly? Had someone in Reading recognized her name and telegraphed back east? Ida intercepted the messenger. "No one by that name here," she said firmly. The young man looked confused. "But I was told you were told wrong," Ida interrupted. "Now you want a drink or not?" The messenger hesitated, then shook his head and left, looking perplexed. Ida turned to Zara, whose face had gone pale beneath her bruises. "Go upstairs," she said quietly. "Use the back stairs. I'll come up when we close." Zara didn't argue, slipping away while Ida distracted the curious patrons with a story about mistaken identity. In her room, Zara paced anxiously. He was closing in. She'd have to leave Reading just as she'd fled Omaha and Denver before it. But where would she go next? How far would she have to run later? Ida knocked softly and entered, carrying the unopened telegram. "This came for you. I didn't let him announce it to the whole saloon." Zara took the yellow envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you. Trouble following you?" Ida asked bluntly. "Yes." "Man trouble," Zara nodded, unable to elaborate. Ida sighed heavily. "Thought as much. Those bruises tell a story, girl, even if you don't speak it." She paused. "Whatever's in that telegram, you've got choices. Reading's just getting established, but we look after our own. Xavier Harrington's got influence with the sheriff and the town council." "You don't understand," Zara whispered. "He's powerful, connected. I need to leave before you read that. Hear me out," Ida interrupted. "I'm not one for other people's business, but when a girl shows up with bruises like yours, running scared, well, I've seen it before. Sometimes running just teaches them they can make you run. Sometimes you need to stand." With those words, she left Zara alone with the telegram. With shaking fingers, Zara broke the seal and unfolded the message. "Found your trail. Stop Omaha, Denver. Now Reading. Stop. You cannot hide what belongs to me. Stop. Remember your promises. Stop returning you to Pittsburgh. Soon. Stop." The telegram slipped from her fingers to the floor. Charles had tracked her movements precisely. How long before he arrived in Reading? Days. Hours. The room suddenly felt stifling, the walls closing in. She couldn't bring this danger to Ida or anyone else in Reading. She had to leave immediately. Hastily, she began gathering her few possessions, stuffing them into her carpet bag. She would take the pre-dawn stage heading north. Oregon, perhaps, or Washington Territory, somewhere even farther from Pittsburgh. A soft knock at her window startled her so badly she nearly cried out. Cautiously, she approached the glass and peered out. Xavier Harrington stood on the narrow balcony that ran along the back of the saloon, his expression grave. After a moment's hesitation, she unlatched the window. "Forgive the intrusion," he said quietly. "Ida sent word to my hotel room. Said you might be needing to leave town in a hurry." "I can't stay," Zara confirmed, resuming her packing. "It's not safe for me or anyone helping me." "The telegram," she nodded, gesturing to where it had fallen. Xavier picked it up, reading quickly. His jaw tightened. "Pittsburgh's a long way from Reading. Not long enough." He watched her pack for a moment, then said, "I have another option if you're willing to hear it." Zara paused, looking at him questioningly. "My ranch," he said. "The Broken Arrow. It's remote enough that strangers stand out. I've got hands who are loyal and discreet. You could stay there while you figure out your next move." "Why would you offer that to someone you barely know?" Suspicion edged her voice. "Because those bruises tell me enough," he answered simply. "I've seen what men like that telegram writer do." "My sister," he stopped, pain flickering across his features. "Let's just say I've seen it before." Zara studied him, trying to judge his sincerity. Everything she'd experienced with men had taught her to be wary of unexpected kindness. Yet something about Xavier Harrington's steady gaze and straightforward manner made her want to trust him. "Your silence is your choice," he added when she didn't respond. "But if you come to the Broken Arrow, it would be safe with me. No questions asked unless you want to share." The offer hung between them: escape, sanctuary, time to think. But could she trust this stranger with her life? "When would we leave?" she asked finally. "Now, tonight. I've got horses ready behind the saloon. We can be at the ranch before dawn." Zara took a deep breath, weighing her options. Stay and face Charles when he inevitably arrived, flee alone to another unfamiliar town, or accept this unexpected offer of protection. "All right," she decided. "I'll go with you." Relief flickered across Xavier's face. "Pack only what you need. I'll meet you downstairs in 10 minutes. After he departed through the window, Zara finished gathering her belongings. She wrote a brief note of thanks to Ida, leaving it with her first day's earnings on the bed. Then, carpetbag in hand, she made her way down the back stairs. Xavier waited in the shadows behind the saloon, holding the reins of 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller, dappled mare. He took her bag and secured it behind his saddle, then helped her mount the mare. "She's gentle," he assured her, adjusting the stirrups to fit Zara's height. "Just follow my lead." They rode in silence through Reading's darkened streets, past the railroad station and the last outlying buildings until only open country lay before them. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast sky like diamonds on black velvet. The air carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains, and the earthy fragrance of sun-baked soil releasing its heat. As they left the town behind, Zara felt herself breathe easier. The steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the open landscape, stretching in all directions, gave her a feeling of freedom she hadn't experienced since fleeing Pittsburgh. "We'll follow the Sacramento River north," Xavier explained as they rode. "It's easier terrain than cutting across the foothills. Once we reach the valley where my ranch sits, we'll turn east." Zara nodded, content to let him lead. The moon rose higher, casting silvery light across the landscape and illuminating their path. Xavier rode slightly ahead, his back straight, his attention constantly scanning their surroundings. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks, a distinctive outcropping of rocks, the distant silhouette of Mount Shasta against the night sky. "Have you been in California long?" she asked during one of their brief rests, surprising herself by initiating conversation. 8 years, he replied, offering her his canteen. "Came west after the war with nothing but a horse and the clothes on my back. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny. Bought the Broken Arrow 4 years ago when it was little more than a run-down cabin and a few hundred acres of scrub. And now it's home. 2,000 acres, a decent herd, a proper house." Pride colored his voice. "Still building, still growing, but it's mine." There was something reassuring about his quiet confidence, not the arrogant entitlement of the wealthy men she'd known in Pittsburgh, but the earned self-assurance of someone who had created something through his own efforts. They continued their journey through the night, sometimes talking, more often riding in comfortable silence. Zara found herself studying Xavier's profile in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the way he carried himself with alert readiness. Despite her general distrust of men, she felt strangely at ease in his company. Dawn was breaking when they crested a small rise, revealing a valley below. The Sacramento River wound through green pastures where cattle grazed. Nestled against a backdrop of hills stood a large 2-story house, several outbuildings and corrals. "The Broken Arrow," Xavier announced with quiet pride. As they approached, Zara could see the ranch was well maintained, with sturdy fences and freshly painted buildings. A bunkhouse stood a short distance from the main house, and smoke already rose from what appeared to be a cookhouse. A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the stables as they rode into the yard. "Was beginning to wonder if you'd decided to stay in town, boss," he called. Then, noticing Zara, he touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Madam." "Joe, this is Miss Campbell," Xavier said as he dismounted. "She'll be staying with us for a while. "Miss Campbell, this is Joe Morgan, my foreman." Joe nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts about the unexpected guest. "I'll see to the horses. Rosa's got breakfast ready." Xavier helped Zara dismount, steadying her when her legs wobbled from the long ride. "You all right?" She nodded, though exhaustion weighed heavily upon her. "Come inside," he said gently. "You can rest, have something to eat. Everything else can wait." The main house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and clean, bright rooms. A Mexican woman in her 50s, introduced as Rosa, the housekeeper and cook, showed Zara to a bedroom on the second floor. "Rest, señorita," Rosa said kindly. "I bring food later." Alone in the tidy bedroom, Zara sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the swift change in her circumstances. 24 hours ago, she had been starting her first day at the cattleman's saloon. Now she was miles from Reading, in the home of a man she barely knew, with the threat of Charles's arrival still looming. Yet for the first time since fleeing Pittsburgh, she felt a tentative sense of security. Xavier Harrington had offered protection without demands, treated her with respect, and brought her to this peaceful valley far from prying eyes. She washed her face in the basin provided, wincing as she touched the tender bruises. They were healing slowly, the violent purples fading to yellows and greens. In time, the visible marks would disappear, though the memories they represented would not fade so easily. Exhaustion overtook her, and she lay down, intending only to rest for a moment. Instead, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first truly peaceful rest she'd had in months. When she awoke, golden afternoon light filled the room. Someone, Rosa, presumably had left a tray with bread, cheese, and cold chicken on the bedside table, along with a pitcher of water. Zara ate hungrily, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal since the previous day. After eating, she found a clean dress in her carpet bag and changed, then ventured downstairs. The house was quiet, with no sign of Xavier or Rosa. Through a window, she could see men working with cattle in a distant corral. She explored cautiously, finding a tidy parlor with bookshelves, a dining room, and a functional kitchen. The house was simple but well-appointed, with touches that suggested Xavier valued comfort over ostentation: comfortable chairs, good books, quality kitchenware. On the front porch, Zara found a rocking chair where she could sit and observe the ranch's activities. The Broken Arrow hummed with purposeful workmen moving cattle between pastures, a blacksmith working at a forge, 2 ranch hands repairing a wagon wheel. Unlike the chaotic bustle of Reading or the suffocating formality of Pittsburgh society, life here seemed to follow natural rhythms tied to the land and its needs. She was still sitting there when Xavier returned from the pastures, dismounting and handing his horse to a young stable boy. He spotted her on the porch and approached, removing his hat. "You're looking better," he observed. "Did you rest well?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Thank you for your hospitality." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Rosa will have dinner ready soon. Would you care to walk a bit before we eat? I could show you around the place." Zara agreed, and they set off at a leisurely pace, Xavier pointing out the various buildings and explaining the ranch's operations. His knowledge and enthusiasm were evident as he described how he'd expanded the property, improved the bloodlines of his cattle, and built a reputation for fair dealings with both buyers and neighboring ranchers. "What brought you to Reading?" he asked as they walked. "If you don't mind my asking." Zara considered her answer carefully. "I needed a fresh start," she said finally. "Somewhere new." Xavier nodded, not pressing for details. "California's good for fresh starts, been that way since '49. "Is that what brought you west? A fresh start?" "Partly." He looked toward the distant mountains. After the war, there wasn't much left for me in Virginia. Family farm was destroyed, parents gone. My sister married a man from Pittsburgh, a businessman. Zara's heart skipped at the mention of Pittsburgh. And you didn't want to join them. Emily wrote about how grand it was, her husband's house, the society parties, the culture, but it wasn't for me. I needed open country, room to breathe. A shadow crossed his face. Then the letters stopped coming. When I finally went to Pittsburgh to find her, I was too late. Too late. Zara echoed softly. Xavier's jaw tightened. Her husband had a temper. Apparently everyone knew, but no one interfered. Private family matter, they said. By the time I arrived, Emily had fallen down the stairs during an unfortunate accident. At least, that's what her husband and the doctor claimed. Zara felt cold despite the warm evening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to kill him," Xavier continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Nearly did. But he was protected, wealthy family, connections with judges and politicians. They made it clear that a dirt-poor former Confederate soldier had no business questioning a prominent businessman's account of his wife's death. So you came west," Zara said, understanding now why he'd been so quick to offer her protection. "I came west," he agreed. "Swore I'd build something of my own, something solid, and promised myself I'd never stand by while someone needed help." He looked at her directly. "Especially not when I recognize the same marks on you that I saw on my sister before she died." Zara couldn't hold his gaze, looking away across the pastures. "Your sister was fortunate to have a brother who cared so deeply," she said finally. "Not fortunate enough," Xavier replied grimly. "I should have acted sooner when her letters grew vague and infrequent. I should have recognized the signs." He paused. "That's why I stepped in at the saloon, why I offered you sanctuary here. I failed Emily. I won't fail again if I can help it." His honesty and the pain behind it touched something in Zara. For the first time since fleeing Pittsburgh, she considered the possibility of trusting someone with her story, not just fragments, but the whole terrible truth. "My bruises," she began hesitantly. "They were given to me by my fiancé." Xavier didn't look surprised, simply nodded for her to continue if she wished. "Charles Whitfield," she said, the name bitter on her tongue. "One of Pittsburgh's most respected businessmen. My father worked for his company. When father died 2 years ago, leaving my mother and me with nothing but debts, Charles offered marriage. He was older, established, respected. It seemed like salvation." They had reached a small creek that ran through the property and stopped by its banks, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "At first, he was charming, generous. He paid our debts, moved mother to a comfortable house in Philadelphia, gave me everything I could materially want." Zara's voice grew softer. "Then, after the engagement was announced, he changed. Small criticisms became shouting. Shouting became more." Xavier remained silent, his face grave. "The first time he hit me, he wept afterward, begged forgiveness, blamed business pressures." She touched her cheek unconsciously. "I believed him, thought it was isolated, but it happened again and again, each time worse than before." "Your mother?" Xavier asked quietly. "I never told her. Charles made it clear that her comfortable situation depended on my cooperation and silence." "And Pittsburgh society," Zara gave a bitter laugh. "They saw nothing, or chose to see nothing. Charles was too important, too wealthy, a pillar of the community." "So you ran?" Zara nodded. "The night he nearly killed me, he was in a rage over some imagined slight at a dinner party. His hands around my throat," she stopped, the memory too vivid. "When he finally passed out from drinking, I took what money I could find, his Derringer from his desk, and fled. That was 3 months ago, and he's been pursuing you since. Relentlessly. Omaha, Denver, now Reading. I'm not sure how he traces me, but he does. The telegram means he's close." She looked up at Xavier, fear evident in her eyes. "I've brought danger to your door. I should leave." Xavier shook his head firmly. "No, the Broken Arrow is probably the safest place you could be. Charles Whitfield may have power in Pittsburgh, but this is different country with different rules. Here, a man stands or falls on his own actions, not his bank account or family connections." "You don't know how determined he is," Zara insisted. "How far his influence reaches." "And he doesn't know the Northern California territory," Xavier countered. "Or that every ranch hand on the Broken Arrow is loyal to me. Or that I've already sent word to Sheriff Dawson in Reading to watch for strangers asking about you." His certainty was reassuring, yet Zara couldn't entirely dismiss her fear. "What happens when he finds me? He won't just give up and go away." If he finds you," Xavier said deliberately, "he'll discover you're no longer alone and unprotected. He'll find a woman who has allies willing to stand with her." He held her gaze steadily. "If you want to stay, the Broken Arrow is your sanctuary for as long as you need it. Your choice, Zara." The use of her first name, spoken with such quiet assurance, sealed her decision. "I'll stay," she said softly. "For now." Xavier nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Now I believe Rosa will have dinner waiting. She's very particular about punctuality." As they walked back to the house, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Sharing her story hadn't erased the danger, but it had eased the isolation that had been her constant companion since fleeing Pittsburgh. For the first time in months, she wasn't facing her fears alone. The following days established a new rhythm to Zara's life. She rose early, often finding Xavier already at work with his men. Rosa welcomed her help in the kitchen, teaching her to make tortillas and sharing stories of her life in Mexico before coming to California. In the afternoons, Zara explored the ranch, gradually venturing farther from the main house as her confidence grew. Her bruises continued to heal, the physical evidence of Charles's brutality fading day by day. With it came a tentative blossoming of hope. Perhaps here, in this remote valley, she could truly build a new life free from fear. Xavier maintained a respectful distance, never presuming upon her gratitude or vulnerability. He treated her as an honored guest, including her in conversations about the ranch's operations, lending her books from his modest library, but always giving her space to retreat when she needed solitude. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Sometimes they talked about the day's work, books they'd read, or Xavier's plans for expanding the Broken Arrow. Other times they simply enjoyed companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts as darkness fell over the valley. Gradually, Zara found herself drawn to this quiet, thoughtful man whose strength came not from domination, but from an unshakable moral center. Unlike Charles, whose charm masked a monster, Xavier's sometimes gruff exterior concealed a profound gentleness. She saw it in how he treated his horses, spoke to his men, and respected her boundaries. A week passed, then two. No word came from Reading about Charles Whitfield or any strangers asking questions. Zara began to hope that perhaps she had finally escaped his reach. Then, on a warm afternoon as she was gathering eggs from the henhouse, Joe Morgan rode into the yard at a gallop. "Miss Campbell," he called, dismounting quickly. "Xavier sent me to find you. There's trouble." Her heart sank. "Charles," Joe nodded grimly. "A man matching his description arrived in Reading yesterday. Been asking about a woman with bruises who worked briefly at the cattleman's. Sheriff Dawson sent word this morning." "Where is Xavier?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "Gone to town with 3 of the hands. Told me to make sure you stay close to the house. Keep Rosa with you." Joe's weathered face showed concern. "He said to tell you not to worry. He's handling it." But Zara did worry. As the day wore on with no sign of Xavier's return, her anxiety grew. What if Charles had brought men with him? What if he had somehow manipulated the local authorities as he had in Pittsburgh? What if Xavier was in danger because of her by dusk? She was pacing the porch anxiously, straining to hear approaching horses. Rosa brought her coffee and attempted reassurance. "Senor Xavier is smart man," the housekeeper said firmly. "He will come back." "It's my fault," Zara replied miserably. "I've brought this danger to all of you." Rosa shook her head. "The evil that men do is their responsibility, not yours, señorita. You did not ask for those bruises." Before Zara could respond, the sound of approaching riders caught their attention. She rushed to the edge of the porch, peering anxiously into the gathering darkness. 4 riders approached Xavier and his men. Relief flooded through her as she recognized his tall figure dismounting. But as he came closer, she saw the grim set of his mouth and the tension in his shoulders. "What happened?" she asked as soon as he reached the porch. "Let's talk inside," he replied, his voice tight. In the parlor, with Rosa bringing coffee and then discreetly withdrawing, Xavier finally spoke. "Charles Whitfield is indeed in Reading," he confirmed. "Staying at the hotel, acting the part of the concerned fiancé searching for his runaway bride-to-be. He's telling anyone who'll listen that you're unwell, prone to hysteria and delusions." Zara felt sick. That's how he explains the bruises when people see them. "Claims I hurt myself during episodes." Xavier's jaw tightened. "He's convincing. Well-dressed, well-spoken, has a private detective with him and letters from doctors in Pittsburgh attesting to your supposed condition. Did he learn I was here? Not yet. Ida's keeping quiet, though Fletcher and his boys have been hanging around Whitfield, looking to earn some reward money. Sheriff Dawson is reserving judgment, but he's under pressure. Whitfield's been spreading money around town, buying influence." Zara sank into a chair, despair washing over her. "It's happening again, just like in Pittsburgh. He uses his money and position to make people doubt me, see me as unstable." "This isn't Pittsburgh," Xavier reminded her firmly, "and I'm not easily bought or fooled." "What do we do now?" she asked, looking up at him with frightened eyes. Xavier sat across from her, leaning forward intently. "That depends on you, Zara. We have options. You could leave, head further north or west where Whitfield hasn't searched yet. I could arrange safe passage, provide money and contacts. Or," she prompted when he paused, "or you could stay and face him, not alone with me and everyone at the Broken Arrow standing beside you. Make your stand here. Face him." The very thought made her tremble. "I'm not strong enough." "You're stronger than you know," Xavier countered. "You survived what he did to you. You had the courage to run, to start again with nothing. That takes remarkable strength." His faith in her was touching, but Zara shook her head. "You don't understand. When he's there in front of me, I become small, helpless, like I can't breathe or think. Because he isolated you. Made you believe you were alone." Xavier reached out, tentatively covering her hand with his. "But you're not alone anymore." The warmth of his touch and the conviction in his voice steadied her. For a long moment she sat silently, weighing her options. Run again as she had before, carrying her fear to new places. Or stand her ground with Xavier beside her. What would facing him involve? She asked finally. "We meet him on our terms, not his," Xavier explained. "Not in Reading where he's buying influence, but here at the ranch with witnesses. I trust Sheriff Dawson, Joe, perhaps the circuit judge when he comes through next week. You tell your story, show the evidence of what he did to you." "The bruises are fading," Zara pointed out. "Soon there will be no visible proof. But I've seen them. So has Ida, Rosa Joe. We can testify to what we saw. He squeezed her hand gently. More importantly, you can speak your truth. In the territories, a man who beats a woman is not considered a gentleman, regardless of his wealth or position. Hope flickered uncertainly. And if they don't believe me, then we have other options, Xavier said grimly. But let's cross that bridge if we come to it. Zara withdrew her hand slowly, rising to pace the room. The decision before her seemed impossible: continue running or turn and face the monster who had haunted her nightmares for months. I need time to think, she said finally. Xavier nodded. Of course. Whatever you decide, I'll support. Just know that you have a home here at the Broken Arrow for as long as you want it. The sincerity in his blue eyes left no doubt he meant every word. That night, sleep eluded Zara. She lay awake, remembering Charles's rages, his cruel hands, his ability to charm everyone around him. Could she really stand against him? Would anyone believe her word over his? Yet the alternative, running again, starting over in yet another strange town, always looking over her shoulder, seemed equally unbearable. And there was Xavier to consider. In the short time she'd known him, he had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The thought of leaving him behind caused an unexpected ache in her heart. Dawn found her still awake, her decision made. She dressed and went downstairs to find Xavier already in the kitchen, discussing the day's work with Joe over coffee. I'll stay, she announced without preamble. I'll face Charles. Both men turned to her, Xavier's face showing cautious approval, Joe's reflecting respect. You're sure? Xavier asked. No, she admitted with a small, nervous laugh. But I'm tired of running. Tired of letting fear dictate my life. If I keep running, he wins, even if he never catches me. Xavier stood, crossing to her. Then we'll face him together. I'll send word to Sheriff Dawson to bring Whitfield here tomorrow. Tomorrow? Anxiety spiked through her. So soon? Better to do it quickly, Xavier said gently. Before doubts can take root again, unless you need more time. Zara took a deep breath, steadying herself. No, tomorrow is fine. I just need to prepare myself. You won't be alone, he promised. Not for a moment. The day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Xavier rode to Reading himself to speak with Sheriff Dawson, while Zara tried to keep busy helping Rosa with household chores. By evening, everything was arranged. Charles Whitfield had agreed to come to the Broken Arrow the following day, believing he would be reunited with his disturbed fiancée. After dinner, Zara found herself unable to sit still, her nerves too raw for conversation or reading. She slipped outside, walking to the small creek where she had first shared her story with Xavier. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky, the air scented with pine and sage. She didn't hear Xavier approach until he spoke. Mind if I join you? Startled, she turned to find him standing a respectful distance away. Please do. He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the water gleaming in the moonlight. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly. Every minute, she admitted. But then I remember what will happen if I don't stand up to him now. He'll never stop. He'll follow me forever because in his mind I belong to him. Xavier nodded. Some men confuse love with possession. Charles doesn't love me, Zara said with certainty. He never did. I'm not sure he's capable of it. He wanted to own me, control me. My beauty reflected well on him in society. My obedience proved his power. She paused, then added softly, That's not love. No, Xavier agreed. That's tyranny. They stood in silence for a moment, the creek's gentle murmur filling the space between them. I was engaged once before, Xavier said unexpectedly. Before the war. We were young, too young probably, planning a June wedding. Zara turned to look at him, surprised by this revelation. What happened? A sad smile touched his lips. The war happened. I joined the Confederate Army not for slavery, which my family never practiced, but because Virginia was our home. Margaret's family sided with the Union. Our love couldn't survive the division. I'm sorry, Zara said softly. Xavier shrugged. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about love. He turned to face her directly. Real love doesn't seek to control or possess. It wants the other person's happiness, even at cost to oneself. The intensity in his blue eyes made Zara's heart beat faster. You've been alone a long time, she observed. By choice, he replied. Until recently, I hadn't met anyone who made me want to change that. The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to acknowledge it directly. Instead, Xavier cleared his throat and said, "We should get back to the house. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without adding exhaustion." As they walked side by side through the moonlit pasture, Zara felt a curious blend of fear and hope. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation she had dreaded for months. Yet here, with Xavier beside her, the burden seemed somehow lighter. At the house, they paused on the porch. "Try to rest," Xavier said gently. "Remember, whatever happens tomorrow, you're not facing it alone." Impulsively, Zara reached out and took his hand. "Thank you for everything." He squeezed her fingers lightly, then released them. "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Xavier." Morning brought clear skies and a crisp breeze from the mountains. Zara dressed with care in her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white collar that Rosa had ironed meticulously. She arranged her dark hair simply, noting that the last of the bruises had faded from her face, though faint yellowing remained around her throat. Xavier was waiting in the parlor, dressed more formally than she had ever seen him, in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. Joe and two other trusted ranch hands were positioned around the property, watchful for the visitors' arrival. "Sheriff Dawson will be with them," Xavier assured her. "Whitfield won't try anything with the law present." Zara nodded, though her racing heart belied her outward calm. What if the sheriff sides with Charles? Dawson's a fair man. He'll listen to both sides. Xavier hesitated, then added, "If the worst happens and the law won't help us, I have a backup plan. Friends in Oregon who could get you safely to Canada if necessary." The knowledge that he had prepared even for failure was oddly comforting. "Thank you," she whispered. Just before noon, Joe appeared at the door. "Riders coming," he announced tersely. "4 of them Sheriff Dawson, a fancy-dressed fellow I take to be Whitfield, another man in a suit, and Fletcher." Zara's blood ran cold at the mention of Fletcher. Why would he be with them? "Probably hoping to earn Whitfield's gratitude," Xavier said grimly. "Stay calm. Remember, this is our territory, not theirs." They moved to the porch to watch the approaching riders. Sheriff Dawson led the way, a solid man with a graying mustache and the weathered face of someone who'd seen his share of trouble. Beside him rode Charles Whitfield, impeccably dressed despite the dusty journey from Reading, his handsome features arranged in an expression of concern. Seeing him again, Zara felt a wave of nausea and fear. Her hands trembled and she instinctively stepped closer to Xavier. "I'm here," he murmured, his steady presence anchoring her. As the riders dismounted and approached the house, Charles's practiced mask of concern slipped momentarily when he saw Zara standing beside Xavier. Rage flashed in his eyes before he quickly composed his features again. "Sheriff Dawson," Xavier greeted, deliberately ignoring the others. "Thank you for coming." The sheriff nodded, removing his hat. "Harrington, Miss Campbell." His eyes assessed Zara carefully. Charles stepped forward, extending his hand to Xavier with practiced charm. "Charles Whitfield, I can't thank you enough for finding my fiancée. I've been sick with worry." Xavier ignored the offered hand. This meeting has one purpose, Mr. Whitfield, to establish Miss Campbell's wishes regarding her future. Nothing more. Charles's smile hardened. I appreciate your concern, but Zara is unwell. Her physicians in Pittsburgh have documented her condition thoroughly. He turned to Zara, his voice softening to the tone that had once deceived her. Darling, I've been so worried. Your mother is beside herself. The mention of her mother sent a pang through Zara, but she held her ground. Don't, she said, her voice stronger than she had expected. Don't pretend to care when we both know the truth. Charles's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. You see, Sheriff, these delusions I mentioned, the doctors explained she might fabricate stories to justify her behavior. Sheriff Dawson looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside. Xavier nodded, gesturing toward the door. The parlor is prepared. Fletcher stays outside. Fletcher started to protest, but a sharp look from the sheriff silenced him. The remaining party moved into the house, where Rosa had set out coffee and refreshments that no one touched. The third man, who Charles introduced as Pinkerton Detective James Wilson, stood quietly near the door, observing. Once seated, Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. Mr. Whitfield has filed a formal request for assistance in returning Miss Campbell to Pittsburgh. He's presented documentation from reputable physicians suggesting she left while not of sound mind. Those doctors never examined me, Zara stated firmly. They're Charles's associates, paid to write whatever he told them to write. Charles sighed dramatically. You see what I'm dealing with, Sheriff. These paranoid delusions are precisely what her doctors warned about. They're not delusions, Zara countered, looking directly at the sheriff. The bruises you can still faintly see on my neck were put there by Charles's hands when he tried to strangle me. The same hands that gave me black eyes, broken ribs, and countless other injuries over the past year. Charles shook his head sadly. Zara has always been high-strung. During her episodes, she sometimes harms herself. It's heartbreaking to witness. Lying comes easily to you, doesn't it, Charles? Zara's voice was quiet but steady. Just like charm and false concern, but we both know what happens when there are no witnesses, when you can drop the mask. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Miss Campbell, these are serious accusations. Yes, they are, Xavier interjected, and they're supported by evidence. When Miss Campbell arrived in Reading, she bore extensive bruising to her face, neck, and body. Multiple witnesses can attest to this, including Ida Marshall, who employed her briefly, and myself. Injuries she likely inflicted on herself during a delusional episode, Charles countered smoothly. Her condition is well documented. By doctors who never examined her, Xavier pointed out. Convenient. The detective, Wilson, spoke for the first time. I've been tracking Miss Campbell through Omaha and Denver. In both cities, she lived under false names, behaving erratically, then fleeing without notice. Hardly the actions of someone in her right mind. Or the desperate measures of a woman running for her life, Xavier suggested coldly. Sheriff Dawson raised a hand. I think we need to hear directly from Miss Campbell. All eyes turned to Zara. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet now that it had arrived, words seemed inadequate to convey the horror she had lived. 2 years ago, she began softly, my father died, leaving my mother and me in financial difficulty. Charles offered marriage security. He was charming, attentive, generous. After our engagement was announced, he changed. She paused, steadying herself. The first time he hit me was over dinner I'd arranged that he felt was beneath his station. He apologized afterward, blamed stress. I believed him. Charles started to interrupt, but the sheriff silenced him with a gesture. The violence escalated, Zara continued, always in private, always followed by remorse that became increasingly brief. He controlled where I went, who I saw, what I wore. He threatened my mother's welfare if I told anyone or tried to break the engagement. She described the final night in Pittsburgh, Charles's rage over a perceived slight, his hands around her throat, her certainty that she was going to die. When he passed out from drinking, I took what I could carry and ran. I've been running ever since, changing my name, moving when I felt him getting close, until Reading. A heavy silence fell over the room when she finished. Sheriff Dawson's expression had grown increasingly troubled. "That's a moving performance," Charles said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "But without evidence, it's merely the delusional claims of a disturbed woman against the word of a respected businessman." "I have evidence," Zara replied, surprising everyone, including Xavier. From her pocket, she withdrew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Carefully, she unfolded it to reveal several letters. "These are from other women," she explained. "Women who either worked in Charles's house or were briefly courted by him. Women who experienced his cruelty and were silenced with threats or money. I found them in his desk the night I fled." Charles's face drained of color. "Those are private correspondence. You had no right. They describe your violence in detail," Zara continued, ignoring his protest. "Patterns identical to what I experienced." She handed the letters to Sheriff Dawson. "These women were afraid to speak publicly, but they wrote down what happened. Some even named witnesses." Sheriff Dawson accepted the letters, scanning the first one with a deepening frown. "Mr. Whitfield, these allegations are extremely serious." Charles rose abruptly. "This is absurd. I came in good faith to retrieve my unwell fiancée. Instead, I find her living with another man, making outrageous accusations and presenting stolen private papers as evidence. I won't stand for it." He turned to the detective. "Wilson, we're leaving. I'll pursue this through proper legal channels." As he moved toward the door, Xavier stepped in his path. "You're not taking her anywhere, Whitfield, not today, not ever." Charles's practiced facade cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "She belongs to me," he hissed, low enough that only Xavier and Zara could hear. "She's mine by right and promise. You think you can keep her, Cowboy? A woman like Zara needs things you can never provide." "The only thing she needs," Xavier replied evenly, "is to be free of you." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, Charles's refined, aristocratic features contorted with fury, Xavier's calm resolve unwavering. Then Sheriff Dawson stepped between them. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Mr. Whitfield, I need time to review these letters and consult with the circuit judge who arrives next week. Until then, no one is taking Miss Campbell anywhere without her consent." "This is outrageous," Charles sputtered. "I have rights." "Not here you don't," the sheriff cut him off. "Not if these allegations prove true. In California, we take a dim view of men who beat women, regardless of engagement promises or social standing." He tucked the letters carefully into his vest pocket. "I suggest you return to Reading and await my decision. Attempting to remove Miss Campbell by force would be unwise." Defeated for the moment, Charles gathered his dignity and turned to Zara. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice cold. "Remember your place and what's at stake." "I know exactly what's at stake," she replied steadily. "My life, my freedom, and I won't surrender either to you again." After the visitors had departed, with Joe and the other hands escorting them to the property line, Zara sank onto the sofa, trembling from the confrontation but also exhilarated by her own courage. Xavier sat beside her, respecting her space but close enough to offer support. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "Those letters, you never mentioned them." "I wasn't sure I could trust anyone with that knowledge," she admitted. "They're my only real leverage against Charles if they had been destroyed or taken from me." "I understand." He hesitated, then added, "Sheriff Dawson is a good man, but those letters may not be enough. Legal proceedings can be lengthy and unpredictable, I know." Zara met his gaze steadily. "But for the first time since I fled Pittsburgh, I'm not running in fear. I'm standing my ground." "Whatever comes next, that matters." Xavier's expression softened. "Yes, it does." He reached out tentatively, covering her hand with his. "Whatever happens, Zara, you have a home here, for as long as you want it." The sincerity in his voice and the warmth of his touch sent an unexpected flutter through her heart. In that moment, with the tension of confrontation behind them, Zara allowed herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them over the past weeks, a connection deeper than gratitude, more profound than mutual respect. "Thank you," she whispered, turning her hand to clasp his. "For everything." The days that followed brought an uneasy calm. Xavier increased security at the ranch, with men patrolling the boundaries and always someone watching the road from Reading. Charles remained in town, waiting for the circuit judge's arrival, occasionally sending messages through Sheriff Dawson requesting meetings with Zara that she steadfastly refused. Despite the looming uncertainty, life at the Broken Arrow continued. Zara found herself increasingly involved in the ranch's operations, keeping accounts, helping Rosa manage household supplies, even learning to ride properly with Xavier's patient instruction. With each passing day, she felt less like a guest and more like she belonged. Her feelings for Xavier deepened, though neither spoke openly of the attraction growing between them. Instead, they shared quiet conversations on the porch at sunset, occasional brushes of hands that lingered longer than necessary, glances that held meaning beyond words. Xavier was careful never to pressure her, respecting that she was still healing from Charles's abuse and the upheaval of her life. A week after the confrontation, Judge Holloway arrived in Reading. Sheriff Dawson rode to the Broken Arrow to inform Zara that a hearing had been set for the following day. "The judge has reviewed the letters," he explained, "and wants to hear testimony from both parties before making a determination. Will I have to return to Pittsburgh if he rules against me?" Zara asked, fear tightening her throat. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Technically, there's no legal charge against Mr. Whitfield that would prevent him from escorting his fiancée home. However," he added quickly, seeing her distress, "Judge Holloway takes domestic matters seriously." The letters are compelling. That night, unable to sleep, Zara slipped downstairs to find Xavier also awake, sitting in the darkened parlor with a glass of whiskey untouched before him. "I can't stop thinking about tomorrow," she admitted, sitting across from him. "Nor I." He studied her face in the dim light from the banked fire. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," she replied honestly. "Not of seeing Charles again, that fear has lessened, but of being forced to return to Pittsburgh, to that life." Xavier leaned forward, his expression intense. "That won't happen. Even if the judge rules in Whitfield's favor, we have options." "Running again," Zara sighed. "I'm so tired of running." "Not necessarily." He hesitated, then continued carefully. "There's another possibility, one that would give you legal protection from Whitfield's claims." She looked at him questioningly. "Marriage," Xavier said simply. "As your husband, I would have legal standing to refuse Whitfield's demands. No court would force a married woman to return to a former fiancé." Zara stared at him, stunned by the suggestion. "You would marry me?" "To protect me from Charles." "Yes." His voice was steady, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "But not only for that reason, Zara." "What other reason could there be?" she whispered, though her racing heart suggested she already knew. Xavier set aside his untouched drink and moved to kneel beside her chair. "Because in the weeks you've been here, you've become essential to me. Because I admire your courage, your resilience, your gentle heart. Because when I think of the future of the broken arrow of my future, I can't imagine it without you. Tears filled Zara's eyes. Xavier, I'm not asking for an answer now, he said quickly. It's a practical solution to our immediate problem, yes, but it's also more than that, at least for me. If you don't feel the same, we'll find another way to ensure your safety. Always. She reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. You've never even kissed me, she said softly. A smile touched his lips, an oversight I'd be happy to remedy. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Xavier leaned forward. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought fresh tears to her eyes, not from fear or pain, but from the stunning contrast to every interaction she'd had with Charles. Where Charles had demanded, Xavier asked. Where Charles had taken, Xavier offered. When they parted, Zara kept her hand against his cheek. Yes, she whispered. If tomorrow goes badly, I will marry you, Xavier Harrington. Not just for protection, but because I've found something with you that I never believed existed: respect, partnership, tenderness. And if tomorrow goes well, he asked, his eyes searching hers. Then I'll still marry you, she replied with a small smile. But perhaps we might have a proper courtship first. The hearing the next day took place in Reading's small courthouse. Judge Holloway, a stern-faced man with keen eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened as Charles presented his case, his concern for his unwell fiancée, the expert medical opinions, Zara's erratic behavior in fleeing Pittsburgh. When it was Zara's turn to speak, she faced Charles directly for the first time, her voice clear and unwavering as she detailed the abuse she had suffered and her reasons for fleeing. She presented the letters from other women, which the judge examined carefully, asking pointed questions about their origins and authenticity. Ida Marshall testified to Zara's condition when she arrived in Reading: the extensive bruising, her difficulty speaking from throat injuries, her evident fear. Xavier spoke of what he had witnessed, drawing parallels to his sister's situation in Pittsburgh years earlier. Throughout the proceedings, Charles maintained his composure, though Zara could see the rage building behind his mask of concern. When the judge finally called a recess to consider his ruling, Charles approached her outside the courtroom. "This performance is impressive," he said quietly, his cultured voice at odds with the malice in his eyes. "But we both know you'll return to Pittsburgh eventually. You belong there, with me." Before she could respond, Xavier was at her side. "I believe the judge asked everyone to keep their distance during deliberations, Mr. Whitfield." Charles's gaze shifted to Xavier, contempt evident. "Do you honestly think a woman like Zara could be content on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, with a man like you?" He laughed softly. "She was raised for better things. She was raised to be independent and strong," Xavier countered, "qualities you tried to destroy because they threatened your control." "Gentlemen," Sheriff Dawson's voice interrupted them, "the judge is ready to deliver his ruling." They returned to the courtroom, Zara's heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Judge Holloway sat behind his desk, his expression grave. "This is a troubling case," he began. "On one hand, we have a respected businessman seeking the return of his fiancée, whom he claims is mentally unwell. On the other, a woman alleging severe physical abuse and presenting corroborating evidence from other women making similar claims." He adjusted his spectacles. "The law gives significant weight to formal engagement promises and the testimony of established medical professionals. However, it also recognizes that no promise, however binding, can justify violence against women." Charles leaned forward, confidence evident in his posture. Having reviewed the letters Miss Campbell presented and heard testimony from multiple witnesses regarding her physical condition upon arriving in Reading, I find her account credible, the judge continued. The pattern of abuse described is consistent and alarming. Relief began to wash over Zara. Therefore, I rule that Miss Campbell is under no obligation to return to Pittsburgh with Mr. Whitfield. Furthermore, I am issuing a territorial restraining order prohibiting Mr. Whitfield from approaching within 100 yards of Miss Campbell for a period of 1 year. Charles surged to his feet. This is outrageous. Those letters could be forgeries. The witnesses are clearly biased. You can't possibly sit down, Mr. Whitfield, Judge Holloway commanded sharply. My ruling stands. If you wish to contest it, you may file an appeal with the territorial court in Sacramento. Until then, you will abide by the restraining order or face imprisonment. Charles glared at the judge, then at Zara, before stalking from the courtroom without another word. The detective Wilson followed, his expression neutral. Outside the courthouse, Zara finally allowed herself to breathe fully. "It's over," she whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. Xavier squeezed her hand. "For now, at least." Charles Whitfield doesn't strike me as a man who accepts defeat easily. "No," she agreed, "but he's been challenged publicly now. His reputation may suffer when word gets back to Pittsburgh." "All the more reason to be cautious," Sheriff Dawson advised, joining them. "That restraining order is only as good as my ability to enforce it. I'd suggest staying at the Broken Arrow for the time being, where you have support around you." Zara nodded. "I had already planned to." The sheriff tipped his hat. "I'll escort Mr. Whitfield to the afternoon stage to Sacramento myself. Make sure he leaves town peacefully." As they rode back to the ranch, Zara felt lighter than she had in months. The fear that had been her constant companion since fleeing Pittsburgh hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had diminished significantly. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly consider a future not just surviving day to day, but building a life. "You're quiet," Xavier observed as they rode side by side. "I'm thinking about what happens next," she replied. "About possibilities. Any particular possibilities?" There was a hint of uncertainty in his voice that she found endearing. Zara smiled. "Last night, I believe you mentioned something about a proper courtship." The tension in Xavier's shoulders eased. "I did. Though I should warn you, my experience in such matters is limited and somewhat outdated." "Mine too," she admitted. "Despite being engaged, Charles and I never truly courted. Everything was arranged, formal, under constant supervision." "Well," Xavier said thoughtfully, "I believe traditional courtship involves walks, shared meals, conversation, perhaps dancing if the opportunity arises." "That sounds lovely," Zara replied, warmth spreading through her at the thought. "Though I should warn you, I haven't danced in a very long time. Fortunately, Reading holds a harvest dance in October. We have a few weeks to practice." They rode in companionable silence for a while. The beauty of the Northern California landscape, unfolding around them rolling hills dotted with oak trees, the distant silhouette of mountains against the clear blue sky. "There's something else courtship traditionally involves," Xavier said eventually. "What's that?" Meeting the family. He looked slightly uncomfortable. "I received a letter yesterday from my cousin Nathan. He's planning to visit next month, bringing his wife and children." "You're worried about how they'll react to me?" Zara asked. Xavier shook his head. "Not at all. Nathan's a good man. I'm more concerned about whether you're ready to face questions about your past, your presence at the ranch." "The truth," Zara said firmly. "Perhaps not every detail, but the essentials. I'm tired of living in shadows, Xavier. If we're to have a future together, it can't be built on secrecy." He reached across to take her hand. "Have I told you lately how remarkable you are, Zara Campbell?" she smiled, squeezing his fingers. Not in the last few hours. Their courtship began simply evening walks along the creek, shared books and conversations by the fire, Xavier teaching Zara to handle the ranch accounts. Unlike the rigid formality of Pittsburgh society, their relationship developed naturally, without pretense or performance. Xavier proved to be a patient teacher when Zara expressed interest in learning to ride properly. Under his guidance, she progressed from the gentle mare she'd ridden from Reading to a spirited chestnut gelding named Copper. Soon, they were taking longer rides across the Broken Arrow's rolling pastures, sometimes stopping for picnic lunches by the river. As promised, Xavier taught her to dance in preparation for Reading's harvest celebration. In the evenings, Rosa would play traditional Mexican songs on her guitar while they practiced in the parlor, Xavier's hand warm against Zara's back, their movements gradually becoming more coordinated as she gained confidence. Through it all, Xavier remained respectful of her boundaries, never pushing for more intimacy than she was ready to give. Their kisses grew more passionate, but he always followed her lead, understanding that her experience with Charles had left wounds that needed time to heal. For Zara, this respect was perhaps the most healing aspect of their relationship. With Charles, her body had never felt truly her own. It was something to be controlled, displayed, punished according to his whims. With Xavier, she rediscovered her autonomy, the joy of choosing when and how to express affection. News from Reading confirmed that Charles had indeed left for Sacramento, then apparently continued east without filing an appeal. Sheriff Dawson reported that Fletcher and his men had also departed, presumably after losing the prospect of reward money from Charles. While Zara didn't believe Charles had truly given up, the immediate threat seemed to have passed. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Nathan Harrington arrived with his family, his wife Rebecca, their 10-year-old son James, and 7-year-old daughter Sarah. They were warmly welcoming, accepting Xavier's explanation that Zara was staying at the ranch after escaping an abusive engagement. Xavier always had a protective streak, Nathan commented one evening as they sat around the fire after the children had gone to bed. Even as a boy, he was the one standing up for smaller children against bullies. It nearly got him killed in the war, Rebecca added. Defending a young Union soldier who'd been captured, the officer in charge wanted to make an example of the boy, but Xavier intervened. Xavier looked uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Nathan said firmly, "not anyone. That's always been the difference with you, cousin. You do what's right, not what's easy." Zara, sitting beside Xavier on the sofa, reached for his hand. "That's been my experience as well," she said softly. The month with Nathan's family passed quickly, filled with shared meals, hunting expeditions, and long conversations about the future. Nathan was impressed with the improvements Xavier had made to the Broken Arrow and particularly interested in his breeding program for stronger, hardier cattle suited to the California climate. As their visit drew to a close, Rebecca took Zara aside while they prepared dinner together. "I haven't seen Xavier this happy in years," she said, her eyes warm. "Not since before the war, perhaps." "He's a good man," Zara replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. Rebecca smiled knowingly. "More than good, I think, at least in your eyes." Zara couldn't deny it. In the months since arriving at the Broken Arrow, her feelings for Xavier had deepened from gratitude to respect, to something far more profound. She loved his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass, the gentleness that balanced his capability. She loved how he treated everyone with respect, from the youngest stable boy to the oldest ranch hand. She loved the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hand always found hers when they walked together, the sound of his voice reading poetry by the fire in the evening. "Yes," she admitted. "Much more than good. Have you told him?" "Not in so many words." Rebecca patted her hand. "Don't wait too long. Men like Xavier, they feel deeply but often struggle to express it. Sometimes they need a little encouragement." After Nathan's family departed, a new rhythm established itself at the Broken Arrow. Zara took on more responsibilities, working alongside Xavier to manage the ranch's growing operations. The harvest dance in Redding proved to be a joyful evening, with Zara wearing a new dress Rosa had helped her make, and Xavier looking handsome in his best clothes. They danced under harvest decorations hung from the rafters of the town hall, Xavier's hand warm against her back, their movements in perfect harmony. On the ride back to the ranch under a canopy of stars, Xavier guided their horses to the overlook where they had first viewed the Broken Arrow together. "It's beautiful by moonlight," Zara observed as they dismounted to admire the silver-washed landscape below. "Yes," Xavier agreed, though his eyes were on her, not the valley. "Zara, there's something I need to say." She turned to face him, her heart quickening at his serious tone. "When you first came to the ranch, I offered marriage as protection," he began, taking her hands in his. "A practical solution to a difficult situation. But these months together, watching you grow stronger, seeing your courage, sharing this life have changed everything." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Zara Campbell. Not out of duty or because you need protection, but because you've become essential to my happiness, to my future." Joy flooded through her. "Xavier, let me finish," he said gently. "I want to marry you, not for practical reasons, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Because when I look at the Broken Arrow, I see not just what it is, but what it could be with you beside me, a true home, a family." Tears of happiness filled Zara's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much. You showed me what love really means, not possession or control, but partnership and respect." Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's," he explained, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "I've had it with me since Virginia, waiting for the right person to give it to." "It's beautiful," Zara breathed. "Will you marry me, Zara? Build a life with me here?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, Zara marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terror of Charles's mansion in Pittsburgh to the peace and belonging she'd found at the Broken Arrow. From a woman silenced by fear to one who had found her voice and her strength. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Sheriff Dawson officiating, Ida Marshall and Rosa serving as witnesses, and the ranch hands gathering to celebrate afterward. Zara wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Xavier had ordered specially from Sacramento, with wildflowers in her dark hair. Xavier looked handsome and slightly nervous in a new black suit, his usually tanned face a bit pale until Zara took his hands and smiled reassuringly. "I, Xavier James Harrington, take you, Zara Elizabeth Campbell, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." When Zara repeated the vows, her voice clear and confident, she felt the last shadows of her past receding. The bruises that had once told stories she couldn't speak had faded completely, replaced by the strength of her own voice promising love and commitment. Later, as they danced under lanterns strung across the ranch yard, Xavier held her close. "Happy Mrs. Harrington," he murmured against her ear. "Completely," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, no longer Zara's guest room but their shared space, carefully prepared by Rosa with fresh linens and wildflowers, Xavier's tenderness healed the last of the wounds Charles had inflicted. Where there had been pain and fear, now there was only love and trust, their bodies joining as their lives had, with respect and passion in equal measure. Afterward, lying in Xavier's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Zara felt a profound sense of peace. "I never thought I could feel this way," she confessed softly. "Safe, cherished, free." Xavier traced gentle fingers along her bare shoulder. "You deserve nothing less, always." As autumn turned to winter, the broken arrow prepared for the colder months. Hay was stored, cattle moved to sheltered pastures, the house made snug against mountain winds. Zara threw herself into these preparations with enthusiasm, learning from Xavier and the ranch hands, contributing ideas drawn from books on agriculture and animal husbandry that she ordered from Sacramento. Together, they planned expansions to the ranch, additional pasture land, improvements to the irrigation system, a small orchard of apple and pear trees. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, heads bent together over maps and figures, discussing possibilities for the coming year. "You've transformed the place," Joe Morgan commented one day as he and Xavier inspected newly constructed cattle shelters. "Not just the land, but the house too. Feels more like a home now." Xavier smiled, watching Zara in the distance, instructing a ranch hand on winterizing the chicken coops. "She's transformed everything," he agreed. As Christmas approached, Zara prepared for their first holiday as husband and wife with joyful anticipation. She decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, baked traditional cookies using her mother's recipes, and worked secretly on a special gift for Xavier, a hand-stitched quilt for their bed, each square representing an aspect of their life together. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, they sat before the fire exchanging gifts. Xavier's eyes widened with appreciation when he unwrapped the quilt, running his fingers over the intricate stitching that showed the Broken Arrow's landscape, their horses, the creek where they often walked. "This is extraordinary," he said, voice husky with emotion. "You made this yourself?" Zara nodded, pleased by his reaction. Rosa helped with some of the more complex stitches. "Do you truly like it?" "I love it," he assured her, leaning over to kiss her softly. "Now my gift seems inadequate in comparison." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, Zara found a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with her initials and filled with blank pages. "For your stories," Xavier explained. "You mentioned wanting to write someday about your experiences, about building a new life. I thought perhaps this could be a beginning." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. It was such a thoughtful gift, not just the beautiful journal itself, but the recognition of her desire to reclaim her voice, to transform her painful past into something meaningful. "It's perfect," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. "Thank you." "There's one more thing," Xavier added, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. "This arrived yesterday." Curious, Zara opened it to find a letter addressed to her in familiar handwriting, her mother's. "How?" she gasped. "I never told her where I was." "For her safety, I couldn't. I sent her a letter," Xavier admitted. "After we were married, I thought she deserved to know that her daughter was safe and happy. I included our direction but urged caution in her response." With trembling hands, Zara unfolded the letter and read, My dearest Zara, words cannot express my joy at receiving word of your safety and marriage. I have lived these many months in fear for you, unable to speak of it lest Charles learn that I knew anything of your whereabouts. You should know that Charles returned to Pittsburgh, claiming you had died of illness in the West. He wore black for an appropriate period, then resumed his social activities. I never believed his story, but could not openly question it without risking what little information might reach me about your true fate. Your husband's letter was therefore like water in a desert. To know you are not only alive but happy, married to a man who clearly treasures you as you deserve, has lifted a great burden from my heart. Charles's influence here has waned somewhat. Several of the women whose letters you took have found courage to speak privately, if not publicly, about their experiences. While he still maintains his position in business circles, invitations to social events have become less frequent, whispers more common. I long to see you but understand the need for continued discretion. Perhaps someday circumstances will allow us to reunite. Until then, know that you are forever in my heart. Your loving mother. Tears flowed freely down Zara's cheeks as she finished reading. She knows I'm alive, she whispered. All this time, I've been terrified she believed Charles's lies. Xavier moved to sit beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. I hoped the letter would bring you peace. I'm sorry I didn't consult you first. I wanted it to be a surprise. It's the most wonderful surprise. She looked up at him, love overflowing. Thank you for understanding how much this means to me. That night, as they lay beneath the new quilt in their bedroom, Zara's head resting on Xavier's chest, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. From the terror of Charles's mansion to the peace of the broken arrow, from a woman defined by her bruises to one known by her strength and love. What are you thinking? Xavier asked softly, his fingers threading through her hair. That happiness is possible even after great pain, she replied. That new beginnings can arise from endings that seemed hopeless. And that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise, he added, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Yes, Zara agreed, curling closer to the man who had shown her what true love meant. The most beautiful beginnings of all. Spring brought renewal to the broken arrow calves in the pastures, wildflowers blooming across the hillsides, and the news that Zara was expecting their first child in late autumn. A baby, Xavier whispered in wonder when she told him, his hand gently covering hers on her still flat stomach. Our baby. The joy in his eyes brought fresh tears to hers. Are you pleased? Beyond words, he assured her, gathering her into his arms. Though I'll worry about you constantly until the little one arrives safely. I'm strong, she reminded him with a smile. Stronger than I ever knew, thanks to you. As her pregnancy progressed, Zara continued to be involved in ranch operations, though Xavier and Rosa both insisted she avoid anything strenuous. Instead, she focused on expanding the vegetable garden, keeping the accounts, and continuing the journal Xavier had given her at Christmas. In its pages, she recorded not just daily events but reflections on her journey from victim to survivor to the woman she had become: wife, future mother, partner in building something meaningful and lasting. Word came from Redding that Charles Whitfield had returned briefly to California, inquiring in Sacramento about the Broken Arrow Ranch before apparently continuing east again. Sheriff Dawson rode out to warn them, though he believed there was little cause for concern. The restraining order's still in effect, he assured them. And frankly, Whitfield seemed more interested in business opportunities in Sacramento than pursuing old grievances. Still, thought you should know. Xavier increased security at the ranch nonetheless, unwilling to take chances with Zara's safety, especially in her condition. But as weeks passed with no sign of Charles, they gradually relaxed their vigilance, focusing instead on preparations for the baby and plans for expanding the ranch's operations in the coming year. Summer brought heat to the valley and increasing discomfort for Zara as her pregnancy advanced. Xavier insisted on hiring additional help for Rosa so that Zara could rest more, especially during the hottest part of the day. In the cooler evenings, they would sit on the porch, Xavier reading aloud from novels or poetry while Zara worked on a blanket for the baby. Boy or girl? Xavier wondered one evening, his hand resting on her rounded belly. "Do you have a preference?" "Healthy," Zara replied simply. "Beyond that, I don't mind, though I think you might secretly want a son to teach ranching to." Xavier smiled. "I'd teach a daughter just the same. The broken arrow will need a strong leader someday, regardless of whether they're a son or daughter." His easy acceptance of either possibility was just one more reason Zara loved him. Unlike many men, including Charles, who viewed women as inherently lesser, Xavier saw value in everyone based on character rather than gender or background. "What shall we name the baby?" she asked, setting aside her knitting. "If it's a boy, perhaps Nathan after my cousin," Xavier suggested. "Or James for my father. Both are fine names," Zara agreed. "And if it's a girl," Xavier considered. "What about Emily for my sister? Or perhaps Elizabeth after your mother, Elizabeth Emily Harrington." Zara tested the name aloud. "It has a lovely ring to it." As autumn approached, bringing cooler weather and the promise of their child's imminent arrival, Zara felt a growing sense of completeness. The broken arrow had flourished under their joint stewardship, with increased cattle herds, improved pastures, and a reputation throughout the region for fair dealings and quality stock. Their home had expanded as well, with a new wing added to accommodate the baby and future children they hoped for. Most importantly, Zara had found healing in this peaceful valley. The bruises that had once told stories she couldn't speak had long since faded, replaced by the strength of her own voice in conversations with Xavier, in her writing, in the confidence with which she now moved through the world. The woman who had arrived in Reading terrified and silent had become someone who spoke her truth without fear, who loved without reservation, who had built a life where once there had been only desperate flight. On a crisp October morning, with golden leaves drifting from the oak trees and the scent of pine in the air, Elizabeth Emily Harrington entered the world after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. Xavier, who had refused to leave Zara's side despite convention, held their daughter with awe, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully placing the swaddled infant in Zara's arms, "just like her mother." Zara gazed down at their daughter's tiny face, the delicate features, the wisps of dark hair, the perfect miniature fingers that curled reflexively around her own. "She's our future," she said softly. "Everything we've built, everything we've overcome, it was all leading to her." Xavier sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Zara, the other hand gently stroking their daughter's cheek. "I never imagined such happiness was possible," he admitted. "When I built this ranch, I thought it was enough having land, purpose, independence. I didn't know what was missing until you came into my life." Zara leaned against him, exhausted but profoundly content. "When I ran from Pittsburgh, I was just trying to survive. I never dreamed I might find not just safety but love, partnership, family." "Your bruises led you here," Xavier said thoughtfully. "In a strange way, we owe our happiness to the very pain you endured." "Not to the pain," Zara corrected gently. "To the courage to leave it behind, to your kindness in offering sanctuary. To both of us recognizing in each other something worth building a life around." As Elizabeth dozed peacefully in her arms, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect joy. From a bruised and silent woman fleeing violence to a wife, mother, and partner standing strong and speaking her truth. From desperate flight to purposeful building. From fear to love. "I love you, Xavier Harrington," she said, looking up at the man who had helped her find not just safety but her own strength. "For seeing beyond my bruises to the woman beneath. For saying my silence was safe with you, then helping me find my voice again." Xavier pressed a kiss to her forehead, then to their daughters. "And I love you, Zara Harrington. For your courage, your strength, your heart. For transforming not just your own life but mine as well." He smiled, his blue eyes bright with unshed tears. "For giving me a family I never thought I'd have." Outside the window, the broken arrow spread before them pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, fields ready for next spring's planting, the creek winding silver through the property. The ranch that had once been Xavier's solitary refuge had become their shared creation, a home built on mutual respect and love. And as the afternoon sun bathed the room in golden light, Zara knew with unshakable certainty that the bruises of her past had led her not to brokenness, but to healing, not to silence, but to a voice that would never again be stilled, not to isolation, but to a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.